I wanted to add a quick little audio note for the listeners today for this episode of the podcast. This is a trigger warning. Me and Kiona talk about things like miscarriage and teen pregnancy during this podcast, as well as some negative aspects of this birth story. So if you are triggered by any of these things, please don't listen to this episode. All right, so welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a special guest, Kiona. She is a friend of mine. She lives all the way in Florida, so we're going to do it over Zoom today, and we are going to hear about her birth story. Kiona, you can go ahead and take it.
Where do you want me to start?
So I guess, like a little background maybe. I know that you had Spencer very young, your oldest. So maybe you want to start with that pregnancy and kind of tell the story about that. I mean, you don't have to touch on details that may be triggering or anything like that, but maybe just in general how the pregnancy went and labor and delivery.
Okay. So nothing crazy. I was in high school when I was pregnant. Got pregnant literally on my 18th birthday. So that was a joy. Uh, I was, not a good kid. Moved out the day I turned 18, lived with my son's father, and then that happened. Moved back with pregnancy was pretty normal. I mean, I was small when I got pregnant. I was like 105 pounds. And then I didn't show with him until like 6 months. Graduated high school. I was 6 months pregnant, so there's no reason not to. And then uh, his due date was September 24th. I ended up being induced 4 days later. Well, 3 days later. He was 3 days late. And then the fourth day was when I had him. So he ended up being born on the 28th. Labor wasn't too bad. I mean, it was 12 years ago. He just turned 12. So it was a long time ago. But it wasn't too bad. I had to be induced. They used Cervidil, which is like a tape that the doctor wadded up and just shoves up in there. Leave it there for like 12 hours. So I went in at 10 a.m. They started inducing me. And at like 10 o'clock at night was when they took it out, and I wasn't really progressing too much. I actually had to go to Massachusetts to give birth because that's where my insurance was. The whole time I was there, though, I luckily had my mom because his father kept going in and out of the hospital. I want to say labor kicked up at like midnight when everybody left. I got my epidural the next morning. It was early in the morning. I remember my water didn't even break yet. Hadn't even broken yet. They had me get up to go use the restroom one more time because once I got the epidural, couldn't move. That's when my water broke, which I didn't know what that was at the time. So I thought I just, peed all over the floor. And I was mortified. But then they gave me the epidural, and I could not feel my legs. I couldn't feel my toes. I couldn't feel anything. So I think I got a spinal, not an epidural. But I'm terrified of needles. And the fact that I willingly got the really long needle in my back while contractions is not fun. But after that, kind of sped up a little bit, took a nap, and then I think it was like noon when they had me start pushing. Half hour he was out.
Wow, so pretty quick for your first on pushing. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, he was total. I think I was in labor for 26 hours.
Wow, that's not
from
bad at all.
no, from, being induced, which, some people just progress faster, some people don't. And he was small. He was 7 pounds, 5 ounces, and like 19 and 3/4 inches long. So he was a little peanut.
Yeah. That's like
Um,
average baby weight, they say, like, about 7.5 pounds is, like, the average that they should be at, anything, like, below is considered under.
I
Um,
was like 6 something, so but I was normal. I don't know. I mean, recovery went pretty well. I did They did attempt an episiotomy, but I still tore. He came out with his arm up by his head.
oh,
So he didn't have a big head. He just was trying to wave to everybody. But so that was like 13 stitches. And then
wow. And how was healing from that? Do you feel like it was more brutal than it kind of had to be at that point?
yeah, yeah. Um, I had a hard time walking. I remember because I was still living with my mother when he was born. And I remember having to hold myself up in the car because it just hurt to sit, and it hurt. I unfortunately was not able to breastfeed him. I wasn't able to breastfeed either of my children. He had a small chin, so he couldn't latch on really well. So they didn't give me the shot to stop my milk from coming in, and that was not fun to have to deal with while I'm taking care of a newborn while I'm 18 years old. So,
Yeah,
but
that's
we've made
that's
it. He's
a lot.
12, happy. So
Now
it
thinking
was.
back to, I mean, I know it's like 12 years ago, so it's kind of hard to remember. I mean, honestly, I can't even remember what happened yesterday most of the
Me
time,
neither.
but that's mom brain for you. Um, but thinking back like 12 years ago, sort of like your emotions going into labor and being induced, like, did you have any like fear or anxiety, or were you just kind of like rolling with the punches, like being a good patient?
I I was I was scared because my biggest fear is like going under the knife at any time. And it was never, a concern about having to have a C-section with him because he was a pretty smooth pregnancy. I had like the morning sickness, but at night for like the first trimester, I was able to sleep fine. Like he was like the perfect pregnancy and then even like the perfect baby. Like he was amazing. I did take, but it wasn't terrible.
Yeah, it sounds like the easiest pregnancy in the world. You literally had minimal morning sickness and slept great.
Hmm.
That's great. I mean, for especially for being so young and being your first baby and kind of being scared about like, oh my gosh, I'm bringing a baby into the world. Like, what am I gonna do? At least you didn't have like the physical effects of it on top
No,
still, so that's pretty nice.
it was weird being pregnant in high school. Very weird. 'Cause no one believed me I was pregnant until we did because I graduated in Merrimack and we did a comedy show and I was like 5 months. So then that's when I was showing and people were like, oh, you really are pregnant. Like, I'm not just sleeping in my psychology class for no reason.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
tired.
That's funny that they kinda, like, didn't believe you. It's like, but also, like, I kinda get it. Like, I remember being in high school, like, there were some girls who would kind of lie and be like, "Oh, like, I'm pregnant," and they weren't actually, just because that's I mean, that's high school, man. People, like, lie about things to get the attention and yada yada. So, I mean, and then there are people who are really pregnant who don't get believed because of, it's literally like the boy who cried wolf. So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, then people believe me. They're like, oh, yeah, my God. No, I'm making up. I never wanted children when I was younger, but I don't take back. I even have baby fever for a third, and I'm like, oh, God.
baby fever, I feel like never goes away as you like watch your children grow. And not necessarily, like, in a fact of, like, "I wanna have a baby," but it's like, "Oh, like, remember when you were so small and you were just like a little
Mhm.
hot potato? I want that back."
They don't talk back. You can leave them in one spot.
Yep.
Yeah, Spencer was the perfect baby. Slept good, ate good. Now he's almost a teenager, so now it's, puberty.
Yes, it's a whole different ball game now that he's starting to get in those teen years.
Oh, yeah.
So, how was, so I guess we can go to the second one. So you have a daughter who's a lot
Mhm.
younger. So I guess, tell me the story about that. You met your husband, your current husband, um, and you guys have a beautiful little curly redheaded baby that I love seeing pictures of because she's so adorable and I'm so jealous of her hair.
Her hair is a nightmare to deal with, but everyone tells us she should be a model because she's got the red hair, the curly hair, the little gap in between her teeth, and she is a firecracker. Like, she's got my attitude, my husband's attitude. The red hair comes from him and a little bit from me, and she is a Scorpio, so she turns 4 this month.
Yeah, she packs a punch. She looks like she packs a punch.
Oh my god, she does, she does. So with her, because that was way more recent, hers was like the complete opposite of my son. We got married um, about 5 years ago. Actually, our fifth anniversary will be in a few days. And then a few months later, found out I was pregnant. I worked at a nursing home, so it was whatever was in the water. And I did miscarry before I got pregnant with her. So she was kind of like our miracle rainbow baby. So because I had miscarried like a month before, I was nervous. I was a nervous wreck the whole time. My job just kept putting me in positions that was not, I don't feel was safe, like lifting patients myself. So eventually I did leave there. My pregnancy with her was miserable. I could only sleep sitting up in my bed or in a rocking chair. I had Braxton Hicks all the time. I was double the size I was with my son, like belly wise. I was all belly, but like double the size. Um, she was actually only a day late, and I was not induced for her, which was great. I basically, they scared us with one of our anatomy scans, telling me that there was there was something in one of her scans. It was like they saw bubbles or something in her brain that they said she could have like the T18 chromosome, which could lead to a stillbirth.
Wow.
So they scared us with that, and we went to like an emergency scan in Maine, and whatever was going on with her was resolved at that point. So she just wanted to put me through everything. I was sick with her constantly, leg leg cramps like Charlie horses. It was just a nightmare. But I wasn't dilated with her at all at every visit. And then I go in for my visit on her due date. I was maybe a centimeter dilated. They're like, "We'll have you come in the next day for a non-stress test and an ultrasound." And then I remember that morning at like 2:30 a.m. I woke up to go to the bathroom. I pushed one of my cats, out of the way with my foot, and my water broke.
Yay.
I didn't know what I thought it was. I didn't know it was that. I was like, did I just like pee all over the floor or like what happened? And then I realized what it was because I kept walking and it just kept coming. So I'm like, okay. I go wake up my husband and I'm like, hey, my water just broke. I need to call the doctors. And he was half asleep and he went back to sleep. And I'm walking around with a towel between my legs, trying to call the doctor, trying to get everything ready, waking up my son because he was 8. So I have 8 years in between my kids. And I'm waking him up. I'm trying to call my mother-in-law. I'm trying to call my father. I'm trying to call someone to come get my son because he has school and I don't want him at the hospital when I'm giving birth. Am I waking my husband up again? Something didn't register in his mind, and I give him crap for this to this day. He made me take my car while I'm in active labor. My contractions weren't too bad, but he took his truck and I took my car. And
No.
I was like, yeah, I'm like, so I'm driving, having contractions to the hospital. And then, I asked him like a few months ago, I'm like, why did you have me take my car? And he's like, I thought I was going to work the next day. I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm like, okay, no, you were not. You weren't going to work at all. His dad
You
even
coulda
made him take
Ubered
off.
home from the hospital to get your truck if you had to, but
We could have taken the same car. Like it just in his head, he was half asleep. She's his first child, so he was already like just unaware of what was happening. So I just give him crap for it. I make fun of him for it. But we get there. Um I wanted to try to do natural this time with no epidural, just, naturally. And I was concerned about a C-section with her because she was measuring quite big. So that was something I was scared about, but I was more, I have a birth plan, but whatever needs to be done will be done. I'm not one of those people that I want to strictly stick to my birth plan. If I'm not doing good or she's not doing good, whatever needs to be done, I'm okay with it. Uh, he ended up bringing my son to school while I'm in labor still, because no one was coming to pick him up yet. My mother-in-law showed up as I decided to get an epidural finally about like 8:30 in the morning. So I labored from 2:30 to 8:30 with no medication. Think I was already 6 centimeters at that time, but then I finally got an epidural because I couldn't do it anymore. My mother-in-law showed up as they were doing it and told her to leave. And then because of the epidural, my labor just like stopped. It slowed down. They had to give me Pitocin, and she kept laying on her cord, so they kept having to flip me. They put me on oxygen because she kept doing that. Um, Eventually, it was like probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon. My labor was still really slow, so they lowered the Pitocin a little bit. I could feel my toes and everything with my epidural, so that's when the anesthesiologist like, "Yeah, you had a spinal with your son because you should still be able to feel something." And I'm like, "Okay." So eventually, it was my husband who was sleeping in the tub because there was no room. My mother-in-law and my father were there, and my father-in-law showed up later in the day, and one of my brother-in-laws showed up later in the day. But
it
they
sounds
kind of
like a party. Every time you give birth, it's just like everybody waltzes in like a big party. Oh my gosh, that's
well,
great.
it's a big deal because it's my husband's first child, and his brother-in-law is his older brother, and 2.5
I
hours with her. She was getting stuck, I guess, and they kept having me push. My father-in-law was trying to be respectful, not like he covered me every time that I didn't need to be exposed.
That's very
And then
sweet.
eventually, they turned me on my side, and my father was holding my leg, and he's a 6'2" military man. I almost knocked him over with the amount of force I was pushing with, and she was coming out, and they were yelling at me to stop
No.
because the doctor was not in there. The nurse came in to check, and she was crowning and just about to come out and yell at me to stop. My brother-in-law walked in as this is happening, walked right back out.
Good, bye-bye.
My poor husband, he didn't know where to stand. I was scared he was gonna pass out, so I'm like, stay up by my head, just stay up there. And the doctor came in, and she was facing the wrong way.
Sunny side up.
Her Yep, her shoulder was stuck. So I luckily, one of the doctors I did meet with on one of my OB visits was also there because they were short-staffed, and I had her pushing down while he is pulling my child out, and it was my husband wanted to punch him because the way he was pulling her out, he was scared he was gonna hurt her, but how she was stuck wasn't good, and then my father told me this months later, found out she wasn't breathing when she came out, but she was okay. They took her right there. I wanted to do chest to chest, but they had to take her right to the table. I told my husband, "Go to her." He ended up being pretty much 10 pounds,
Wow.
23 and a third inches long. I had
Like,
a toddler.
you literally gave birth to a toddler, that's crazy, but she still came out of you vaginally, which is amazing, regardless
She
of tearing and everything like that.
she should not have been. She should not have came out that way. I told my husband, if we ever have another one, I'm getting ultrasounds up until the day of, and if that baby is anywhere near as big as she is, it is going to be a C-section.
Oh.
I'm not made to have babies that big. It was just not good. On the plus side, though, recovery was a lot easier with her, surprisingly.
Do you
I was
recall how many stitches, they had to do this time? Was it, like, as many, or was it, like, not as bad?
mm, it was nowhere near as many, and I don't know how. I think it was maybe like 6 or 7.
Not bad.
No, I know, after the epidural wears out, they have you stay in the bed, wait for you to um, gain some motion back. My hips were jacked though, like worse than with Spencer, and she's been she couldn't latch. She was tongue tied, so I couldn't breastfeed her either. And she turned out to have sensitivity to formula, so she needed to be specialty formula, and she's got eczema, and she literally is like my problem child.
Yeah, I feel like the second one's always the problem child. It's just
I
like the
still
first baby, like, "Oh, that was cake, let's have another." And then you have another, and they're, like, crazy, and they have all these rashes and skin problems and sensitivities, and you're like, "What happened?"
exactly. I think she was born not long after you had Caroline.
Yeah, Caroline just turned 4 in September.
Yeah, because I remember it was you, me, and Melissa Hapgood all had babies, and Haley all had babies, like one after the other.
Yeah, yeah, funny. It's
I
funny
remember
that
that.
we were, like, sort of pregnant at the same time. I think I remember, like, a few times, I think we chatted a few times during, um but yeah, that's crazy that I mean, your 2 birth experiences, I feel like were slightly similar in some ways, but the pregnancies were, like, polar opposites. And it's funny that, like, I mean, who knows, like, what the reasoning behind that, maybe, like, when you were just so young, you just didn't notice. Because I feel like, especially, like, as we get older, we're more, like, aware of our bodily functions, like, I don't know, like, it sounds weird, but, like, as I get older, I'm, like, more aware of, like, my headache specifically hurts right here, but I remember being younger and I'm like, "I can't pinpoint where my headache hurts," you know what I mean? Like, I feel like as we get older, like, we can pinpoint things better with our bodily functions and maybe like that has something to do with it, but also like who knows, boy versus girl, you know what I mean? Like all those things playing a factor, and every pregnancy is different for everybody.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because I had my kids so far apart that just birth in itself was a lot easier because I was younger. I was in shape, I was healthy, I was able to do it. With my daughter, I did just lose like 50 pounds, no, 30 pounds before I got pregnant with her. And then I was just eating a lot. I had a lot of fears with her because of the miscarriage before it. And I was just terrified if like I didn't feel her moving. If I felt weird, it was just terrified. I was a nervous wreck. I feel like I could not enjoy my pregnancy because of that. and
Mhm.
that probably made it worse for me because I could not enjoy my pregnancy with her. That's why I had a hard time sleeping. I was scared to sleep on my side.
Mhm.
I was only, comfortable to sleep if I was sitting fully up.
Yeah. That can be, like, really, really scary to have that anxiety, especially after having a miscarriage. I mean, it's actually, like, a little bit, like, of a coincidence because I think we talked about this, I also had a miscarriage before I got pregnant with Caroline, so, like, with
You
Caroline,
did?
my 2nd baby, I had had a miscarriage right before, and I had so much anxiety. I would have, like, nightmares of, like, waking up in a pool of blood or, like, crazy, like, things happening, and I just, like, almost didn't feel like it was real up until, like, I actually felt her, like, fully move. I didn't feel like it was real, like, up until that point just because I was like, "Who knows what's gonna happen," you know? Like, I just don't want it to happen again, and it's just crazy. It's crazy that we both went through, like, the similar situation with the babies, that we went through. Um, but yeah, I mean, so going into your 2nd delivery, did you do anything to sort of prepare yourself to go more natural and go without, an epidural and kind of did you do any, like, mental preparedness, any, like, physical preparedness?
I I did a, birthing class, like, I wanna say a couple weeks before I gave birth, and I was the only one in my class that was just, like, about ready to pop, and it was actually funny because the nurse that was in charge of the class was my day nurse when I was in labor, and then the assistant was the one that was there for me giving birth to my daughter, so it was nice to have someone I was familiar with, but I made my husband do the birth class because, first baby, he had to go do it. And it was also so long in between that I know things had changed. And I wanted to try it naturally because I don't like needles. And I want to be able to get up and walk after I have her. I didn't want to have to be laying in the bed because, it's filled with blood and everything, and they're pushing on your stomach too. So, what else is that filled with? But it just would make it easier. But I tried um, the sorry, lost my phone battery. I was trying with the method of breathing over the ball. I think it's called box breathing.
Mhm.
Did that on my knees, bouncing on the ball. The ball did help actually quite a bit with the bouncing. I was surprised, but then it got too much, and I couldn't do it. The nurse did come in because, like I said, it was the nurse that ran the class that was there. She did like the back massages and like pressing on my hips, and she was encouraging to do it. I don't think I could have done it for as long if I didn't have her.
That's so sweet. It's
Yeah.
it's almost like doubling as a doula. Thank you, nurse. Nurses don't always do that stuff. They'll just like, husband, go put a hot pack on her back and I'll talk to you in an hour." Like, like it's nice when you do have like a nice and caring nurse who cares about your wishes and wants to help you in ways that, maybe your husband doesn't know how to.
And I mean, he wasn't there while I was going through this because he had to go bring my son to school. So he wasn't there. And even after having Riley, I was okay with him leaving. He would leave for some of the day to go bring my son to school because my son was with my in-laws have like a live-in nanny. He was with him at our apartment. So my husband was there during the night with me, and then he would go bring my son to school and then pick my son up. So I was okay with him, leaving. I was fine. I didn't care if he left for the day. It wasn't a big deal. I feel like a lot of women get mad if their husbands aren't there to like dote on them, which I get it, depending on how you birth and how your husband is and everything. And, you do you, no judgment against it. When I tell people, yeah, my husband was gone, a few hours and he would bring me back food or something like that. They're like, he wasn't there the whole time. Like, no, I mean, what is the point of him being there the whole time? I'm just sitting there in a chair, rocking a baby. That's all I'm doing. I'm not doing anything exciting. he did take the whole week off and help me, and then I made him go back to work early because he was getting on my nerves.
Well, I feel like you're like, just depends on personality type too. I feel like for you, it seems like through our conversation, like, you're kind of more of an independent person. You don't need someone to do everything for you. You'd rather kinda just do it yourself, or kind of have, like, your alone space, like, your quiet time. So I feel like it just depends on the personality. Like, some people care, some people don't. If you're the type of person that, like, always needs someone there, then maybe they'd get mad if their husbands tried to leave. But I mean, I feel like you're kind of like a really independent person, so I feel like that also plays a part in it.
Stuff, so he
Yeah,
helped when I needed him to, that's what mattered.
right.
So, I mean, recovery-wise, he was very, very helpful. I think that's why I recovered so much better with my daughter, because he would, if I needed something, he would get it for me. Um, I do know, I don't know if it's TMI, the first bowel movements after a child, they did not give me stool softeners or nothing, so that was a traumatic experience in itself, and my poor husband did not know what to do because I am screaming and crying. He doesn't know what to do,
No, and this is
and
with the second one? That's crazy.
yeah, Spencer was fine, and I actually noticed, because I don't know if every hospital does it, but I had a nurse come out to my apartment a couple weeks after I had my daughter to check on how I was doing, to see how I was doing, like, physically healing, so she checked, like, my healing, and then she was like, "You need to be taking, stool softeners," um, oh god, I the, uh can't think of it, the powder. Miralax, there you go.
Oh,
Take that, and then, my feet swelled after. I had no feet swelling until after my daughter, and it was so bad, like, I could see the liquid in the top of my foot moving. She scared both of us, saying, "If I don't get my feet up, then I'll have, like, kidney problems."
oh my goodness, yeah, and
So
then
she
the first
scared
time that
us.
they had, like, told you to take stool softeners was a few days later or a few weeks later?
A couple weeks later, I don't know I don't know if they forgot. I don't know, and this was pre-COVID, so this I had her right before COVID.
Yeah,
Um, like, at least what, like, 6 months,
yeah, it
I
was a
think?
few. Yep.
Yeah, so it was just, like, that was the only bad part, and then I do notice that compared to when my son was born to when my daughter's born, they actually, um, cared more about my mental health to make sure that I was recovering okay postpartum, because I had delayed postpartum depression with my son. I didn't have it until, like, 3 years later. And with her, I was struggling a little bit, but they were constantly doing check-ins to make sure I was doing okay. Obviously, they wanna make sure baby was okay, but they were also like, "Go see the social worker that they had in my OB to just talk to make sure you're doing okay, see if you need anything."
Good.
And it was like, they did not do that with my son. No one came and checked on me a couple weeks later. No one made sure I was doing okay mentally, because it's hard. Some mothers struggle a lot.
Yeah, it is hard, and that's, like, the biggest thing for me is, like, I don't necessarily I mean, yeah, of course, like, I care about labor and delivery and pregnancy and all that, but, like, at the core of it, like, the biggest thing for me is helping women, like, feel better postpartum, right? Is because like, if you have a positive birth experience, if you have a positive pregnancy, no matter, like, complications, medical decisions, changes in your birth plan, as long as you go into, like, hop from pregnancy and delivery to postpartum, like, okay, like, you're on the right track to hopefully have a smoother postpartum, and it's so crazy that they send someone to your house. I've actually never heard of that before, where, very strange. Did you deliver at the same hospital both times too?
No. So my son I delivered in Lowell, Massachusetts because I had TRICARE. So that was the insurance that I delivered at. And then with my daughter, I was actually on Medicaid because I had stopped working once I got further along. And I gave birth at Rochester, New Hampshire. I forgot the name of I think it's just Rochester Memorial.
Okay.
I gave birth there,
Okay.
so
Yeah,
it
I
was
mean,
closer.
I haven't really had any experience at Rochester. I don't think I've ever been there. And then I've, like, heard some things about Lowell. Um, but it's funny how they, like, wouldn't kind of give you more resources and help as an 18-year-old versus, like, a fully grown adult woman. But I mean, also at the same time, like, time's changing. More stuff happens now to people, like, postpartum than it has ever before, or at least, it's more represented in, like, news headlines and you hear about it more. So maybe that's, like, part of just, like, their initiative to, like, be better. But
I'm good with 2 kids. I'm good with 2. I have a boy, a girl. I'm good. Don't really want to start it again.
yeah, I mean, you hit the lottery getting a boy and a girl, so, you know.
Lucky. My husband was in denial. He was having a daughter. His sister has 3 boys, so he thought, for sure he was going to have a boy. And then his mother came with me to do the anatomy scan with the gender, so she got to see that she was having her first granddaughter. And then I made a cake for him, and my roommate knew, obviously. She knew what we were having because I told her, and she helped me bake the cake. And then I brought it to his house, well, his mom's house. So I cut the cake with him and his younger siblings around. And I think I share the clip on Facebook still every time. I'm sure you've probably seen it.
Think I
His sister's recording me cutting the cake, and then it's a girl, and he's like, "Damn."
have.
He loves her though. She has him wrapped around his
Oh,
finger.
yeah. I can tell by the pictures she's such a daddy's girl, like, she's just, like she blinks and he just, like, is there at her begging call.
Oh, yeah. It gets kind of frustrating because, like, he'll come home. She doesn't give me a hard time really. He'll come home and then he'll want to like go do yard work or go relax or something, and she is just following him around up his butt
Yeah.
because she loves him. And then he's like gone, and I'm here, and it's just he's got her after. He does everything for her.
Oh, that's so sweet that, like, father-daughter bond is something that's, like, so special and, like, fun to watch. I mean, I have 3 girls, and they all love my husband, and I'm like, they never behave for me as well as they do for him, and it's so aggravating because he, like, just lets them run rampant, and they do whatever they want, and he's, like, fun dad, and the house is trash when I get home, and then when I'm home, nobody wants to help me clean up the mess that they made, and it's just crazy and chaotic and full of attitude, and it's just so much.
Same,
Yeah,
same, same. And he's a good stepfather to my son too.
yeah,
So he's raised him for more than half his life. Spencer's called him dad a couple times.
yeah,
So I'm like, that's what you want to call him, that's fine. He's
yeah,
basically his own child. He's been around since my son was 5 and he's now 12. So
that's a long time, so, I mean,
yeah,
yeah, at that point, you're like, "Well, call him whatever you want, I guess."
yeah,
It's
yeah,
easier, so
yeah,
well, that's good. I'm glad that they have a nice bond too. That's special in and of itself because, missing the father figure in his life, now he has one. That's like a great role model for him, it seems.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so sweet and heartwarming.
Yeah.
Oh. All right. Well, it was great talking to you and thank you for jumping on this last minute.